Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting here from a snowy Washington, D.C., a thin coating of snow over the nation's capital, despite the fact that it's the first day of spring. Now, we have a busy program today. We're following, once again, a whole bunch of struggle situations, and we'll try to get to those as we can. But let's first of all make some obvious points about foreign policy. Pardon me. Concerning the Israeli elections and Netanyahu. Now, Netanyahu, of course, qualifies as a warmonger demagogue, and he shamelessly engages in displays of racism vis-a-vis the Arab citizens of Israel. There are Arab Israelis who represent a significant political bloc in the parliament there, the Knesset. Netanyahu, obviously a racist, and at the same time someone who has built his political career on war and the threat of war. Now, this is intolerable, and we have to remember that the only reason that Netanyahu can do these things is because he gets this $3.5 billion subsidy from the United States in terms of military aid and other aid. Remember that the Iron Dome, which with the anti-missile system that has allowed the most recent excesses by Netanyahu, was also a joint project with the U.S. and heavily funded by the U.S. So the question now arises, how to restrain, how to mute the excesses of Netanyahu. Because remember, this is now an attempt to drag the United States into war really on two fronts, right? One is the Iranian front, where he has been focusing with his demagogy in his speech to the U.S. Congress, and then also vis-a-vis the Palestinians. The Iran demagogy we've discussed in previous weeks, but now concerning the Palestinians, on the eve of the election, as everybody now knows, Netanyahu said, if you create a Palestinian state, then you're simply creating a playground for Islamic fundamentalist extremists. And the question then, does that mean that under your prime ministership there won't be a Palestinian state? The answer, indeed. Now, after having reaped the fruits of that demagogy, Netanyahu then attempted to reverse his field in the famous interview with Andrea Mitchell on the day after the vote, saying, I have not changed my policy. I don't want a one-state solution. I want a two-state solution, but it has to be viable and with security guarantees and all this. Now, of course, from the point of view of the insider, I suppose, or just an outsider who knows something, that I guess would be my attempt, it's true, he hasn't changed his policy. Everybody always knew that Netanyahu was a warmonger and that he was inalterably opposed to peace because he's built his political career on the opposite. So there really is nothing new. The point is, though, that he has now made it impossible for his enablers in the U.S., in the State Department, and the Obama administration. Even his enablers can now not defend what he's done because he says, well, we're not going to have a Palestinian state. I have not had a chance to look it all up, but the idea of a Palestinian state was at least implicit in the Camp David Accords of Carter and Begin and Sadat in 1978. And it was explicit in the Oslo Accords that were celebrated at the White House by Bill Clinton with Rabin and Arafat in, 94, I guess it must have been. And we've had others, right? We've had Y River. We've had other interim agreements. The entire bedrock of the entire policy really can only be the two-state solution, right? This also grows out of UN resolutions 242 and so forth, right? So there's no doubt that the two-state solution is indispensable. It's the only one that would ever work, right? And that goes against the various extremist radicals who want the one-state solution, and then the demographic takeover, right? Which it would obviously generate many other problems. So by saying this, Netanyahu has exposed himself. He was essentially a crypto warmonger, if you were willfully blind. But now he's now an open warmonger. So this makes it impossible to support him. I would also add, maybe a little bit more substantively, from the U.S. Population point of view, the idea of forcing this country into a war with Iran, which could easily become a war with others. Let's not even speculate which others, but there are others, and you can imagine who. Those are very, very dangerous activities, and they're intolerable. So, you know that I have long contemplated and to some degree endorsed the idea. It's really the same idea that Franklin D. Roosevelt had in 1944 and 1945 concerning the United Nations, right? The Security Council, as FDR put it, was the 5 policemen. And the idea was you would have an international regime of peace and security that could act against threats. And you can act in a number of ways. I think it is time for some of these smaller countries to be restrained and to be essentially guided, nolens volens, right, willy-nilly, towards these peaceful solutions. In other words, it is intolerable for a petty tin pot demagogue in a tiny country to threaten the peace of the world in this way, to say nothing of the humiliation to the United States and all the rest of it. But the main thing is the peace of the world. So I actually suggest if we had a Russian-U.S. condominium, it would be fairly easy to say to Israel, thus far and no farther, to say to China, cool it on those islands. That's going to be somehow mediated. To say to Ukraine, cool it, time to pull in your horns, and so forth. That sounds a bit utopian. I don't think it is. That was the other big idea of Franklin D. Roosevelt, was that within that world of the 5 policemen, you could have a special U.S.-Russian condominium that would allow precisely problems like this to be dealt with. In other words, the general outlines of the peace accord are clear. They are codified in the fall 2003 Geneva Accords of Yossi Beilin and Yasser Abed Rabo, done, 12 years ago now? And they're clear. We won't go through them now. Go and look at them. Those are the ones that I more or less endorse, although I always want to make sure you add the Marshall Plan for the Middle East. I spent some time contemplating Netanyahu's objection to see if it was fair, because on the surface he seems to have a case, right? He says if you had an independent Palestinian state, then ISIS would be there, Al Qaeda would be there, and I have come to the conclusion that that is not a valid explanation for reasons which I will tell you in just a minute.
By now, you may have heard a bit about Bitcoins, but did you know Bitcoins are now over an $8.5 billion market? And did you know that over 65,000 businesses now accept Bitcoins? Listen, if you're already earning Bitcoins or trying to make money in the Bitcoin market, you've got to know BidBit.co. Why? Because BidBit.co is where you can easily receive Bitcoins by selling and auctioning off your own personal items or promote business products and services for Bitcoins. You heard right. Whether personal or business, you can now buy, sell, and auction your products and services quickly, easily, and securely for Bitcoin at BidBit.co, the first and only marketplace website to offer BidBit Escrow, a proprietary technology which gives buyers and sellers security and peace of mind because all transactions are protected. Start today. It's free to join, free to post, free to auction, and free to bid at BidBit.co. Buy, sell, bid, or auction everything Bitcoin. That's www.bidbit.co. BidBit.co.
Have you ever felt like the United States government knows way too much about your financial affairs? I continue to hear stories about property seizures, frozen bank accounts, confiscation of stocks and bonds. It makes me wonder if the U.S. citizen will ever again have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, with the Drug and Money Laundering Act, the IRS Revenue Ruling 6045 of 1984, and the Trading with the Enemy Act and Franklin D. Roosevelt's Executive Order of 1933, some precious metal holdings are subject to government intervention. For this reason, Midas Resources has prepared a report explaining the boundaries of trading precious metals privately. Whether if you have any intention of trading with Midas Resources or not, I have instructed my representatives to give this report out free. Call for your free copy at 1-800-686-2237. When investing, always proceed with caution. Again, call 1-800-686-2237. Exercise your legal right to trade metals privately. 1-800-686-2237.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Here is what one doctor has to say about Extendovite.
I would like to thank you, Don, for making my job so much easier, because your products just make it so simple, right? To fool around with a lot of exotic things that don't work, we can just put them on your product and things start to work almost right away. I've had dozens of patients with heart problems who have corrected them, and what it's doing, there's so much garlic in there that has a yeast-killing effect. The yeast is a big problem in the gut, pushes the liver hard. It also has metal chelating effect, and most of the other herbs in there I find that strengthen the arteries. They help to neutralize free radicals. Your remedy close to what we do in our program as you can get as far as one supplement goes. It's working on the gut, it's working on the liver, it's working on the arteries. What more can you ask for?
To get your Extendovite, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right, that's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
Not just an alternative to the mainstream media. We're the premier independent talk radio network. We are G's.
welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So, what to do about Netanyahu? My recommendation to Obama would be the following.